Good morning folks, welcome to Armitage Lover. Yet another pricking iron review, or stitching iron review. Now, one of the main reasons that I do this is to highlight what's available and how best you can achieve the saddle stitch with those tools. So I am trying to work my way through all the pricking irons, stitching irons that are available with a view of giving you a good all-round and balanced opinion on each of them, and then you looking at those can make your mind up of which tool is best for you and the sort of leathercraft that you undertake. Stitching irons are designed for your beginner, for your intermediate, somebody who has difficulty commanding the awl, who has difficulty making sure that the line on the back of the item that you're stitching is straight, because if you vary the awl up or down, that in turn then varies the stitching on the back, and you can have this wavy line affair going on. Push the awl in too deep, you get a bigger hole. Don't push it in far enough, you get a smaller hole, it's difficult to stitch. You need a level of skill to be able to command a good pricking iron and a good awl and stitch well. The stitching irons have removed the necessity for this awl work, this command of the awl and this skill level. And in any given day, I can have a student that's never done leatherwork before sit here and with a stitching iron produce a saddle stitch by the end of the day within 8 hours. That's quite a feat. And that's making leatherwork far more approachable to far more people. Because if you've got to spend a year, 18 months, learning how to use a pricking iron and an awl, it become a little bit tedious. And if it's a hobby or something you want to try, it's something that you can get steered away from very quickly because it's unattainable, it's not achievable. So these stitching irons that have come along have made the saddle stitch and therefore leatherwork far more attainable and achievable to far more people. And we have the Sabre, the Craft Sharp, we have the Tandy, Proline, and any number of others that are popping up here, there and everywhere. There's a level of consistencies to some, there's inconsistencies to others. The Proline, for example, it was an eBay seller. Whether it's still there or not, it's very difficult to say. So finding a consistent company sometimes is difficult. Tandy's very good for that. Tandy's there. They've been there for a very long time. They're going to be there a very long time. The likelihood is Sabre's going to be exactly the same. So there's a new company. There's a couple of new companies, but one in particular I've been speaking to, Crimson Hides, that appear to be quite well established, have produced a line of stitching irons. I'll call them stitching irons. They are irons that a beginner can learn with. Your very first stitch can be with this iron. But I didn't realise up until picking these up that there possibly was a gap between the stitching iron and the pricking iron, and this Crimson Hide iron, stitching iron definitely, seems to fill that gap. And there's a very specific reason for that. And what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the log and we're going to have a look at these irons in detail. We're going to look at the presentation first, and then we're going to look at the teeth. And you'll see what I mean when we look at the teeth in detail. Firstly, presentation. They come boxed up. Absolutely lovely. Visually, when you open the box, you are quite taken with the quality. I know these have been poured about, so there's fingerprints and marks on them already. They're not looking as pristine as they did when I first got them. But just to give you some specifications, now I've got a sheet. This sheet's available on my website. Go to www.armitageleather.com/shop. I shall put a link down the bottom. You can download this spec sheet, as you can for all the spec sheets, for all the irons of all the reviews. So you're in a better position to make your mind up. But the short version is they're 115mm long, so they're exactly the same as the Tandy irons. It's a good size, it's a handful, they're easy to hold, and they feel quite weighty and meaty in the hand. That's quite nice. There's a beautiful powder coating to them, and the teeth, well, we'll talk about the teeth in a bit. I'm going to go even closer. But the distinctive thing is they're DC 53 tooling steel and then heat treated. These things are strong. They are going to last an absolute lifetime. I'm not going to go into any more detail about the specs. I want to talk about the teeth. We'll talk about the specifications of the teeth, but let's really get close and have a good look at why I'm excited about these irons. Now, this is the 4mm iron. I have two sets. I have the 3mm and the 4mm. I have the 9-tooth and the 2-tooth in each. Just to give you an example of how much that is, that's 190 Singapore dollars. They're evidently from Singapore. That equates to £109 UK and $134 US. Obviously, import duty is going to have an impact on that price. But look at those teeth. Look how polished these teeth are. That is phenomenal. That is absolutely incredible. But that's not the only thing. If I keep this tool at this angle, you will see that these teeth actually taper. Now, the width at the base of these teeth is, and this is right down by the shoulder here, you're going to have to go in as far as the shoulder at the very least to get the size of the hole. So if you go through thin leather and you go as far as this, you're looking at a hole of 2.3mm. Up towards the body of the tool, it gets towards 3.1mm. That's that way. However, if we now put it on the side, it tapers this way as well. So looking at the shoulder, we are looking at a thickness down here of 1.4mm, coming up towards the body to 2mm. So the less you go in with this tool, the smaller the hole will be. So if we start to penetrate the leather around this area, we get the smallest hole. As we go through thicker leather and come up higher, we then end up with a larger hole. That is no different to how an awl works. It's tapered towards the tip, it's broad towards the back. The further in you go, the bigger the hole you get. The smaller the hole you want, the less you go in. This is more like a row of awl blades than a row of teeth. That has me quite interested in these irons, quite excited to be fair, because this is where I'm thinking that it is bridging the gap, because all the other stitching irons so far, the teeth are straight up and down. If they're 2.3mm at the base, they're 2.3mm at the top, and the thickness remains the same as well. These taper. They're highly polished, which means this is going to sail in the leather and come out so easy, making life a lot easier. If it's easier, you are more effective. If you're more effective, you get a neater stitch. You're not fighting the leather. This is bridging the gap. This is a stitching iron. A beginner can learn with this today and continue well into their intermediate stages. But in addition to that, it's producing a stitch that is comparable to a pricking iron. That cannot be argued with. Let's let the tool speak for itself. Let's actually put it through some leather and stitch it and see what happens. These are the irons that I have. I have a 3mm set and a 4mm set. Both sets are 2 and 9 teeth irons, and each set is the 190 Singapore dollars. Depending on the size of the set that you have, depends on the cost, evidently. But yeah, each one of these would set you back 190 Singapore dollars, which is £109 or $134. Now, they do quite a range. 3mm being the smallest, which gives us an SPI of 8. It then goes to 3.25, 3.85, 4, which gives us 6. So the likelihood is we've got a bit of a half SPI in the middle towards a 7 in there. And then it goes up to a 5. There are 4 irons in each range. There's a 1-tooth, 2-tooth, 5-tooth and 9-tooth. And you can buy individual irons, or you can buy the sets of 2, as I have done, 3 irons, which would be the 2, the 5 and the 9, or the 4, which would be the 1, 2, 5 and 9. So if you go on the website crimsonhide.com, you can have a look at that, but you can also download the sheet and get an idea from the info from there. All 4 irons are pristine. All 4 irons are exactly the same quality, same steel, same presentation, and same fantastic polished finish to the teeth. We have 6 SPI and we have 8 SPI. I think usually I'll pick one and stick with it. I'm not going to do the 2-tooth because I'm not going to go around any curves. We're just looking at what it can produce. Usually I'll pick one and stick with one, but on this occasion I think I'm going to use both. Now, normally for my reviews I'd use a generic thread, something like a 0.6. However, a 0.6 isn't really going to fit either of these that well, so I am going to use the 4mm for the first test, and I'm going to use a 0.8mm thread. So to start with, I shall run a stitch line down the edge of the leather, and then we'll have a look at how these perform. Straight in, straight through, no issue. How do they come out? So easy. Those polished teeth make this so easy. It's absurd. It's like using a pricking iron, except I still need a little bit of pressure. I can't quite take that out one-handed. Look at that. More importantly, look at that. What an even, consistent row of holes, front and back. Let's get some thread, let's put some needles on it, take it to the clam, stitch it up and see what we think. Okay, we're good to go. We're using the 4mm Crimson Hide irons. Number 4 John James, 0.8mm bonded polyester tiger thread. And the reason that I'm using white is I want you to see how this stitch turns out. So a nice contrasting thread to the leather. Now, nothing fancy. This is a simple saddle stitch, no cast, no angled pull, nothing convoluted. This is the absolute core basic bog standard saddle stitch. I want to see what this iron does with this. We can throw a cast at it at a later stage by all means, but for the time being let's just have a look and see how this performs front and back. Now, whilst you're watching me do this, because this is always part of the boring stuff, nobody wants to watch me stitch, but it's an opportunity for me to ramble and talk waffle. I have one very minor, and I will emphasise the word minor, concern over these irons, and I'm not even too sure if concern's the right word. The angle of the tooth. Now, I've looked at the angle of these teeth and they appear to be around the 35-degree mark. I think if they were closer to the 45-degree mark, we would get a slightly stronger looking angle to the stitch. I think the stitch looks nice at 35 degrees on the face. I think it's positive and strong, but it lets the back down a fraction. I think if we were to increase that angle 10 degrees, it would make quite a dramatic difference. I mean, you look at some of the Blanchard irons, you start looking at the 6 SPI, that starts at 40 degrees. You get towards the 7, 8, 9s and 10s, they're set at 50 degrees. For whatever reason, the 12 is set at 60, which I think is too extreme for an SPI that fine. However, 35 does the job. You can see for yourself already, it does the job well. I think if we were just to tip it over that 40 degree towards 45 a little, it would look even stronger, and I think it would allow the back to sit up even more, because there is an angle to the stitching on the back, but it's very, very shallow, because we've got two threads coming from the same direction, going in the same direction. Both want to come from the top of the last hole to the bottom of the next hole, come out the top of the last hole to the bottom of the next hole, and they can't do that. They cross. So there has to be a sacrifice, and the sacrifice is always on the back. It doesn't matter how good you are, there is always going to be an issue on the back of the item. I'm going to have a look at that later and how to deal with this, because this iron actually deals with that beautifully. But I think if we were to increase the angle slightly, it would make a dramatic difference. But nonetheless, that's what this iron gives us. 6 SPI, 0.8mm bonded polyester tiger thread. That's not bad, is it? That is not bad. And like I say, I've put this next to Blanchard stitching and people couldn't tell the difference. This isn't even tapped down yet. Let's look at the back. Now that looks flat. If we get in closer, you'll notice that there is the gentlest of angles to it. And that's what I mean about the angle of the hole. I think if the angle of the hole was close to 45, that would sit up a little more. Let's make this look the best that we can by tapping it down. So bear with me. Give it a bit of a rub. Now let's have a look at that. How's that? That is stunning. You wouldn't be disappointed with that, would you? So you can see now why I'm beginning to think that this iron is bridging the gap between a stitching iron and a pricking iron. It is a stitching iron. It goes all the way through. A beginner can do this. It works exactly the same way as the Sewa, Tandy, Craftshaw irons work. However, that's what you get from it. That is absolutely fantastic. Now they sent me some thread. There's not a lot of it. I only have a little bit of it, right? But it's nice thread, and I have it in 0.5mm. That I think would suit the 3mm iron. So I'm going to do a row of stitching with the other iron on the other side with that thread, so we can have a look at it. So bear with me. You had a look at the 4mm making the holes. Let's have a look at the 3mm making the holes as well. So the lovely thing about these is the tool centres to that point. That point locates in that line. You can feel it. It just falls in. And then when we stand it up, beautiful penetration straight through. Look at that. You can't argue with that. Easy to locate, goes in a dream, comes out even better. You are not fighting it. Everything is slow time, everything is gentle, everything is precise. That's just going to lead you to doing pristine stitching. If you can't stitch with this iron, it's your skill, not the tool. There is no way you can blame the tool for poor stitching when it is producing, I've got to find, there we are, when it is producing a row of holes that even and consistent. And this is the lovely thing about it. If we put that tooth in there, it lines up with every hole. If we then turn the tool over, it lines up with every hole. It doesn't matter which way round this is. You can swap, chop, change constantly. You would never ever notice. If we then straddle the lines, so we've gone from there to there, if we straddle that point, everything still lines up. The symmetry and precision of these tools is staggering. It really is. Let's take the 3mm to the clam and stitch it with that lovely thread. Let's have a look. Okay, number 4, John James with Crimson Hide's own polyester 0.5mm thread. And it looks the part. I don't have much. They only sent me a little tester card, but that's not to say that I can't do some to have a feel of it. And this is just such a dream. Now this is 0.5mm thread with number 4 needles, And I can feel that when I put the needle in, the hole is gripping the needle already. I've got my finger caught there. Which means the hole appears to be the right size. I've done something bizarre here. There we go, let's try again. The hole appears to be the right size for the SPI, which means it's gripping the thread. Now, if it's gripping the thread, it's stitching well. That's the job that a pricking iron and awl does. And it's down to those tapered teeth. I have to say, I am quite excited about these. I want to call them an intermediate iron. If you had to put labels on things, the Sabre, the Tandy, the Craftshaw, they're going to be your beginners. Your Dixons, your Blanchards, they're going to be your advanced. You've had to rely on either of those fitting into both camps to bridge the gap of your intermediate leather worker. You can become quite advanced with the stitching irons, producing a high quality stitch, and you can produce a high quality stitch with all of the stitching irons. The Sabre produces a lovely stitch. You get the thread right, you get your tension right, it looks gorgeous. But this appears to bridge that gap very, very clearly, and this is an intermediate iron, albeit it works exactly the same as a stitching iron, so therefore it's ideal for a beginner. So this has its toes very definitely in all camps. If you bought a set of these and you learned to stitch with them and you became adept with them and you were making items that, handbags, wallets, belts, that didn't take stress, that didn't take strain, you could function throughout your entire leather career on these irons alone, and nobody would notice what they were stitched with, because the quality of the stitch would be such that it would look like it was stitched with a pricking iron. Seriously. I'm sure I've made mention that people had difficulty spotting the difference between Blanchard and these. That speaks volumes. I think it's the tapered tooth. I think that has a huge, huge effect on the whole. I would like to see a little bit of a greater angle, but that is pedantic, and you will see when I finish this. And there's one more little test that I'm going to do with these irons. I'm going to stitch two pieces of leather together, and I am going to prick both sides, two face pieces, and then you can have a look at how this truly behaves when you apply this stitch to an item. And I think you'll make your mind up. And yes, if we call it as a ballpark figure, 140 quid to get it shipped to UK, with custom duty, postage and so on and so forth, that sounds like a lot of money. It really does. But if you're paying 140 quid for an iron that is going to last you your career, and it's TC53 steel, it's case hardened, it does the job, it's as hard as you like, as strong as you like, you're not going to break it, it's going to last. Simple as that. So you're only going to buy it once. And that's the ethos behind the Dixons and the Blanchards. They're strong, they're going to last forever, you're only going to buy them once. You wouldn't be disappointed. I don't think 140 quid for a pair of these is unreasonable. Right. What do we think of that? That's a 3mm with the 0.5mm polyester thread supplied by crimson hides, and that's not bad. There's even an angle to the back. Let me tap this down to put it in its best possible light. Let me give it a rub just to clear away any wax. Ooh. Oh dear. Oh dear me. Oh, I thought it was good before. Sorry, got carried away. Wanted to look for a little longer. Look at that. That's a 3mm. 9 stitches per inch. That's not bad, is it, eh? That's a stitching iron. That's a stitching iron. Doing the job of a pricking iron. That's absurd. Wow. Right. 9 stitches per inch. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Just to give you a perspective of the size. There's a lighter. It's not a big lighter. You can see how fine. I mean, I'm zooming right in so you can see massive stitches. Right, but that's 9 stitches per inch. That's tiny. You wouldn't be unhappy with that at all. Let me go back to the log, show you what I mean about looking at two faces. Now, I only have this much of the thread left, so I'm not going to be using that. I'm going to use the 4mm, but I'm going to use the 0.6mm bonded polyester tiger thread. I'm curious. And then we've had a look at the 0.5, 0.6 and 8mm. Now, the back isn't looking as strong as it could be. I think because of maybe the angle of this tooth being 35. But let's look at how we can increase that. So we've got our item, whatever that be. This could be the gusset, this could be the face, this could be the outside of the wallet, this could be the inside of the wallet, it could be a lined belt. It doesn't really matter, but the fact of the matter is we're making something where you can see both faces. So we want a row stitching on both sides looking really nice. It could be the front or the back of a scabbard, anything like that. So we're going to pick a point to start, and that's the most important thing. We start from the same position. So if we were to imagine, we start there, and this is where our first hole is going to be roughly, then we need to start on this side as well. So we'll turn that round just because I'm left-handed and make it easier, but then we mark it so, and then we can take our line to it. And then we put these two together, these two marks line up. That's important. So we know that's where we start from with our pricking. So another way of consistently doing it, we can either put our first tooth on that mark, or we can put our first tooth over the edge of the leather and then lean the iron into the line. I'm working my own shadow a little bit. Let me just move that slightly. So I'm going to go for the tooth over the edge of the leather, and then all I'm going to do is a gentle tap, because if I go too far I'll mark the top end. I can see those holes, put the iron on properly, and then go all the way through. And then continue as far as I need to, just to make my row of holes. One more. Ready to go. And as long as we do exactly the same on the other piece, from the same direction, tooth over the end, line it up, gentle tap to make those marks, good thump to make the holes, out it comes, thump to go through, and then a last couple of holes just to finish off. Now if we put these side by side, those holes line up perfectly, and that's the most important thing. And then what we can do is we can take two needles, we can put the needle through the first hole on the face piece, the first hole on the back piece, the last hole on the face, the last hole on the back, and then when we squish them together they line up. We can pop that in the clam and stitch. So we've set our pieces in the clam, having lined them up with the needles. We can take those out now because that's not going to move. John James number 4, I'm now dropping to 0.6. So we've done the 0.5 for the 3mm, we have done the 0.8 for the 4mm, but now I'm going to do the 0.6 for the 4mm, and I want to run 3 different threads through so you get an idea of what to look for. And again, bog standard stitch, we're not looking at anything fancy, we are looking at just doing the bare bones basic. The cast can work for you, it can work against you. I don't want to influence these irons to a great degree. I just want to see what they can do, because we can even make a bad iron look good by sticking a cast on strong enough. So you can get a false influence of me sticking these casts on and the stitch looks fantastic and you're tempted to get it purely because I'm making it look good. Here there is no cast. The angle of the stitch is dictated purely and solely by the angle of the hole. I'm thinking 35mm, it's not 35mm at all. 35 degrees is a fraction on the shallow side. It's not so shallow that it doesn't work. It's not so shallow that it's being detrimental at all. I think these irons are brilliant. I think they're fantastic. If you bought them, you'd think exactly the same. You really would. You'd be bowled over by the presentation. You'd be bowled over by the quality. You'd be bowled over by the level they've gone to finish these tools. I think if they were just to tip it up another 5 or 10 degrees, you'd be bowled over even more. Now I'm stitching outside of my clam here, so let's move it in slightly. Now I've got a good idea what's coming up, but I can't see this stitching. You can, because you're looking at it slightly from the side. I have an idea that what we're going to see is going to be gorgeous. You're probably way ahead of me. I've only got a few stitches to go before I can have a look. But what I'm doing here will sell the iron. I think once you see what happens when I turn this piece of leather round and you realise how easy it is to achieve an exceptionally high quality stitch that is comparable to a pricking iron on both sides of an item, you'll be on the website buying the full set. Even I'm tempted. I'd like a full set of these. I think there's very definitely a place. Right, you ready for this? That's the front. That's the back. Let me tap it down so you can see it at its best. There's 3 bits of leather. There's 2 bits of leather, 3mm each, so 6mm there. So the holes are quite large. Need to give them a good bash to close it up. Give that a rub. What do you think of that? So let me ask you the question: is that the front or is that the back? Same question. If I gave that a slightly better rub with the cloth, just to make that edge pop up even more. Bearing in mind that leather's not been beveled or edged. You can't argue with that. I'm just going to get, I don't know how close this camera will go in, but you can see there it's all stitch. Yes, there is a little bit of a hole between the stitching, but there's nothing at either end. A pricking iron will give you a smaller hole, a more slanted stitch, but if you produce bags, cases, pouches, belts, wallets with this stitch, they will look stunning. They will look high quality. That's a fantastic stitch. That's a fantastic stitch because of these teeth. You can produce a good item. You can have a good stitch with many different irons. There's lots available. You can get a very, very, very good stitch with a much, much cheaper iron. But this is strong, it's well made, it's going to last, so you're going to use it for a long time. We're talking years and years and years. This tool isn't going to last you a year. This tool's going to last you 10, 20 years. If this DC53 is as good as they say it is and it's case hardened, there's no reason why this wouldn't last for the rest of your career. That's a severe selling point. That's really strong. Let me zoom out so you can have a look again. So there we are, proof of the pudding. The 3mm with a 0.5mm thread, the 4mm with the 0.6mm thread, and then we've got the 0.8mm. And just to give you some perspective of that, that's 10p. So we can see the size of the stitching, and for our American cousins across the pond, I have $1. So that's not bad. We're looking at a fine stitch, 9 stitches per inch, 6 stitches per inch. That's a beautiful stitch, achieved really, really well, and you can't argue with that. That's the 9, and that's the 6 with the 0.8mm thread. The back could be better. The back is not bad. You wouldn't be embarrassed if you were to show somebody the back of that. You wouldn't be embarrassed by it. It could be a little more angled. There is an angle to it. If you look at the white stitching, you can see that there is an angle, but it's very, very gentle. And I think if we tilted that tooth a little more towards 40-45 degrees, then we would get a better rendition. This is a gentle angle. There is definitely very much a saddle stitch angle to it, but it is gentle. I think if we were to tilt it over, it would be stronger. It would all work in our favour. But nonetheless, you push the tool in a little bit and you get the smallest hole possible. You take it in further, it increases the size of the hole, exactly the same way that an awl works. It is a row of awl blades rather than a row of stitching teeth. That's phenomenal, folks. I've gone off on a little bit of a tangent. I have been bowled over by these. I think they are staggering. I want all of them. I want a full set. I want to play with them. I want some more of that thread, certainly, so I'm going to have to speak to them about that. But if you had these irons, yes, I appreciate that there's a price tag attached, but quality demands a price tag, and I don't think this price tag is actually that unreasonable for the amount of iron that you're getting, and not just the amount of iron but its capability as well. Don't take my word for it, folks. Ask other people, find if you know somebody who has one, and go and try them for yourself if that's possible. Do your digging, do your research, go on the website, have a look, make your own mind up. If you had to choose an iron to start with, I don't have it here, so it's very difficult for me to say. I've always maintained the best iron or best SPI to learn with is 7 stitches per inch. That's going to be the 3.25 or the 3.85. One of those two I would suggest is probably going to be the closest to 7, and that's going to be the ideal stitch to learn, and that would look fantastic with 0.6 bonded polyester tiger thread. But if you've got the 3mm or the 4mm, you know what you get, and you see there, that's going to look superb. Enjoy. I hope it's been helpful. Happy stitching.